Give me a tech stack. Give me any company in the world, and I will challenge everybody on this. Give me a tech company in the world and tell me you don't use any open source. So let's start with that, right? That nebulous community is created by maintainers that you fund, because that maintainer burnout is real. And that's why the sustainability of the project is really critical. It's normal to have that imposter syndrome that, have I done anything in the industry? And people have asked me, like, Arun, do you even think about it? I said, no, I mean, I'm a human, right?
Welcome to Ship Happens, a podcast where I sit down with some of the smartest people in the industry to talk about the skills, techniques, and mindset that helps you ship amazing software. Today, I am talking to Arun Gupta, VP of Developer Experience at JetBrains, and previously, he held open source roles at every notable tech company such as Intel, Apple, AWS, Oracle, and he's also been in a number of governing bodies in the open source world, such as Linux Foundation, OpenSSF, CNCF, and he's also one of the original Docker captains. And so Arun has been part of open source and tech since the very start at Sun Microsystem. So with decades of experience, we are of course going to talk about that today. But we're also going to dive into how Arun found himself part of the recent Intel layoffs, and all of a sudden found himself this very new job market and got like a very real experience of what it means for people in tech as they look for jobs in this new market and the new demands towards job seekers. So what did he do and what can others learn from it? It is a big pleasure to welcome Arun to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today, Arun. Let's start with some basic information on you, Arun. Like, who are you? Where are you from?
So I grew up in Delhi, India. So that's sort of where I spent my early childhood. All my schooling is from there. I moved to the US back in 1998, and I came straight to Bay Area. And I worked for a couple of years in India, but most of my career has been built in the US, in the Bay Area itself. And this is home for almost last 30 years now. So I love this place. This is where we have been. So that's me as a person. Family, I'm a very family person, 5 kids. My parents live with me. So we're a 3-generation family living in the same house. I love that part. Personally, I'm a fitness freak. As we were discussing about this call, right before this call, I got up 4:30 this morning and I did my 10K, just in time, for another call. And I do running, lifting. I believe in mindfulness. I believe in kindness and respect for others, and creating a society that is more diverse and inclusive. Those are some of my core beliefs. I'm a curious listener all the time, but I'm equally a contrarian who would challenge the status quo, why things are in a certain way. So those are some of the things that would define me.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. Are you a marathon runner as well? Or is
I
it more
am.
like shorter distances? Okay.
No, I have. I've done 35 full and half marathons around the world.
God.
So yeah, I've been running for almost 25 years now.
Okay.
And I don't do long distance running, but I average about 25, 30 miles a week now.
So you had these technical roles since, I believe, 96, if I read your LinkedIn profile correctly. And also you've done software engineering since 97. Your education is electronics and computer science. And did you just simply always know that you wanted to work in tech? It seems like just a very straight line, straight from education into that.
Well, it may seem like as a straight line, but it's very easy to sue people who are where they are in their career, but it's always like a crooked line, right?
Yeah.
In the hindsight, it looks like, it seems like a straight, simple line, but no, it is always full of challenges in terms of where it has been and how it has grown up. Frankly, when I was in college, I took electronics as an undergrad. And the reason I went into computer science is my sister was into computer science. And my dad said, yeah, she's doing computer science. You do computer science as well. And this is back in mid-90s, right? Computers was the hottest thing and everybody was getting into that field. So I feel very blessed in that sense that I happened to be there, in the right time at the right place. And then I did my master's in computer science and I got out, after that, worked for a couple of years in India. I still remember sitting at Sun Microsystem campus, in Cupertino back in 98. And right behind me, there was a big poster which says, "We are the .in.com." And that gave me goosebumps. I said, that's the company I want to work for. And again, I was very fortunate to be able to recruited by Sun to want work in the Java JDK team. So I was part of the original Java team starting from 99. JDK 1.1 is what we were releasing around that time. And I stayed with the team until 2013. That's the last time I really applied for a job, until more recent adventure.
Yeah.
But after that, I've been very lucky, very fortuitous, where folks who have known me through my work really have said, hey, you know what? You want to do something fun and come work for us. So I've been just hopping roles purely because people have reached out to me. I'm always willing to explore an opportunity. And as a runner, I'm always up for an uphill run. And so, in that sense, I'm always up for a new challenge. And that's what all these job opportunities have been all along.
So it wasn't like a big plan you made back in the 90s and then it just worked out. It was just like coincidences and contacts and just working your way up and through different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, for example, when I joined Amazon, I was at Couchbase, and that's very the time where I was super active with Docker and doing all sorts of blogging. And I remember 2015 or so, I did about 80 blogs in just that 1 year on Docker only. So really met Solomon, all these people over there at Docker Company. And I got an original Docker blogger jacket with my name in it. So I have that original antique really with me. And so my manager from Amazon called me, or my hiring manager from Amazon called me, hey, whatever you're doing for Couchbase, just do exactly the same thing, but do it for Amazon. Voila, there you go. You move on to Amazon and you give a much bigger stage. So I think that was really, one was the Java world, because I was one of the primary Java evangelists. So travel all around the world because of that. And second was when I joined Amazon, really getting into this cloud native Kubernetes ecosystem much early on, is being able to talk about it more vocally. Is when I joined Amazon, I asked, hey, why are we not part of CNCF? And I said, oh, we should. Yeah, okay, it's your job now. So that ended up becoming my job. And this is back in 2017 when I wrote the Amazon 6-pager for us to join CNCF. And we joined CNCF. I was one of the governing board reps. And I stayed on the governing board for about 8 years. And then from whatever I was doing at Amazon, Apple called me, hey, whatever you're doing over there, do that for us. More internal focus. And so my board membership transferred from Amazon to Apple. And that's where I became the governing board chair. And then from there, Intel called me that, hey, whatever you're doing there internally, we don't know what you're doing, but we see you very well known in the open source circle. Come work for us. And so they hired me. So essentially, I was on the CNCF board for 8 years across these 3 companies. And so very closely in touch with the Linux Foundation folks. I think it just turned around, it's a path that was carved out. Oftentimes, you would think, oh my God, I'm stuck in a situation. I don't see the path ahead. So I think I just took that faith that, just jump into a new ship and we'll figure it out together.
So you seem like you're like the one-man army that kind of walk through these companies and say, hey, why are we not in the CNCF, or why are we not doing open source? Why are we not? Like, you seem you've been carrying this topic across these different companies. So what is it about open source that attracted you?
Oh my God, yeah. What is it not about open source? Why would you go the closed source route? I would ask that question. Yeah, I mean, anything and everything are about open source. And frankly, open source has been the thread across all the beads of my work career, right? Yep. That is what has carried me along. I love the speed with which you can innovate. I love the speed with which you can build with each other on. And open source, the concept is we stand on the shoulder of giants. So there is a fundamental Linux work that was done by Linus Torvalds. On top of that, you created, for example, Red Hat Linux. On top of that, that's sort of the operating system of the internet, so to say. On top of that, your AWS is built. On top of that is where, so you keep going top above the stack. This is all open source layer. So really the innovation happens everywhere in that sense. I love the people in open source. I love how we are solving deep technical problems. Each one of them requires deep global collaboration. And there is no other way. There is no other way by which you can do global collaboration without open source. So I think in that sense, that ability to connect with people across the world, across different industries, across different companies, across different cultures, has been such an enriching and a humbling experience. And every day I talk to a person, say, "Oh my God, this is exciting," and it you really feed from it, and that's sort of what has kept me in and around open source constantly every day.
So that's from your point of view. What about the different companies? Have things changed over the years? I'm sure that Sun had different reasons to engage in open source than, for instance, like AWS or Apple has. Like it's. I'm guessing it has changed since like '96.
Yeah, very much, very much. Back in '99, when we were trying to do closed source to open source at Sun Microsystems, that's sort of where I first learned the trick of open source. What does it mean? Not just throwing the source code over the wall, but understanding what the open source culture is. The fact that you're having a water cooler discussion, how would people in the open source community know about it? So then having that conscious discipline that, summarize this discussion, put it onto the dev list so that people and the outside community can understand about it. I think that was a key part of it. And that's a fundamental part of the culture. So earlier, when I was working at these companies, it was more about what is open source? What is the philosophy of open source? What is the culture of open source? Why we should participate in open source? A lot of that education needs to be done. But now, if you think about it, the bar is a little bit lower. There is a lot more understanding of open source. I mean, if you think about Linux Foundation, that has been into existence for more than 20 years now. They have done a terrific job. In addition, there is Apache, Eclipse, GNOME, Rust Foundation. All of these foundations have cropped up that are truly, truly the advocates of open source. There are open source program offices, and I've been part of several of these open source program offices, founded some of them. So in that sense, that awareness is a lot more. I think where it needs a bit more education is, think about the end user companies, right? And by end user companies, I mean, pick up a retail agent like Walmart or Target. Pick up a car company like Mercedes-Benz or Toyota or Volvo. Pick up whatever. These end user companies, they're also starting to realize the benefit of open source, because to them, really, it's not just about monetizing. To them, it's about, we rely upon these open source projects, and it's critical for us, for the sustainability of these projects, that we are able to shape and define what that open source project looks like. Because if that open source project steers away in a different direction, it's not going to be good for the company. So instead of creating the project from scratch, I'm just going to give one or two maintainers to the project. And frankly, that collective pool is what makes the open source projects sustain and thrive. And I think that fundamental dynamics has changed, particularly if you think about how Kubernetes has been done by 80,000 people from 5,000 companies. No single company can invest that and then monetize it. And yet, cloud providers are minting money out of their managed Kubernetes service. So in that sense, bringing money back into open source, keeping it sustainable, funding those maintainers to work in that open source project, all of that, the funding models that have been created, for example, by GitHub, like sponsors and things like that. So that dynamics definitely has evolved over the last 20 years.
Yeah, and I think that's a very recent discussion about funding of maintainers and sustainability, and like really getting to this point saying, okay, there's actually a lot of people investing a lot of the time in this, and we need to figure out a way to either keep them involved or like pay them or do other things to really keep them engaged. Counterpoint to this whole thing about open source, like, at least for people who work in tech, it's like, well, open source, isn't that just business as usual? Do you even need these people anymore? There's like, the open source pioneers, the open source program officers. Are they even needed anymore? Isn't open source just the default?
Give me a tech stack. Give me any company in the world, and I will challenge everybody on this. Give me a tech company in the world and tell me you don't use any open source. So let's start with that, right? If you're using Linux, if you're using Java, if you're using Rust, if you're using Go, if you're using Python, you name it. These are all standard open source languages, right?
Yep.
And if you're using open source languages, so there's definitely a need for a legal department, because you want to make sure that you're using those languages in the most compliant manner. If there's a problem with the language, how do you contribute a fix to the language? And it's not that one day you wake up and say, oh, you know what? We have a problem and we want this fix. We will file a bug and community will fix it. There is no nebulous community over there. That nebulous community is created by maintainers that you fund, because that maintainer burnout is real. And that's why the sustainability of the project is really critical. And I think that's where the role of OSPO is so much more critical.
Yeah.
OSPO, the primary role within the company is to really be the open source advocates, doing open source the right way. Not only that, but like at Apple, I founded the OSPO, and we were started giving talks outside in the world in terms of what is Apple doing around Kubernetes and all that fun stuff. And that became a recruiting magnet that, oh, Apple is doing on Kubernetes. I want to go work for Apple. Things have changed now, but the point is, it really becomes a very solid magnet, because when you are using those open source projects, you want those open source experts and maintainers who can effectively help you operationalize that within your company. So I think the need for OSPOs, the need for all of these open source advocates, foundations is only growing right now.
So at the same time, we have this thing of you can say open source is a little bit maybe for new developers it's a bit of a commodity. They're just used to pulling things off GitHub, or they find it on npm. It's just a thing that's there, and maybe they don't know the relevance of open source anymore. And now we also have this new angle of AI, right? People use agents, and the agent will pull the dependency, and no one really cares where it comes from. They might not even know how it works, and they might not even know that if it's their bug, they can go and fix it. Like they might not even know it's AGPL or MIT or whatever it is. So it's more like, do you see that like as a threat to open source, this like commodification and this like automation of like before people knew their tools and their stack in more detail. Like people had fights on the internet whether they should use one library or another, right? And like maybe is that all going to go away?
Not at all. Not at all. I think it only accentuates the problem more. See, because when you're building an enterprise software, right? As part of that enterprise software, you talked about agents, right? Talk about agentic coding, for example.
Yep.
People are using these coding agents, say, hey, build me a Tetris game. Boom, it just builds you an MVP, and you're able to play the Tetris game in next like 15 minutes, and you're live. Talk about building an enterprise software. For building an enterprise software, there are so many things that you need as part of that. You need security, you need compliance, you need reliability, you need scalability. This vibe coding is very good at building an MVP, but go back to my running analogy. Building an enterprise software is like a marathon, and vibe coding is only mile one marker. It gets you started, but then mile 2, 3, 4, as things start getting tougher, these coding agents have limited context in which they can operate. They don't understand your organizational context. It's very hard to kind of put that down into the detail. It doesn't know. You can't say that, oh, my system is not scaling to 10,000 VMs now. Coding agent, go fix it. So I think in that sense, what if there's a vulnerability that happens? It pulls up a random library. So would you put that into production? So I think, yes, vibe coding really gets you started with an MVP part of it. But what you really need is, first of all, a control on this. Run your experiments, but have a very clear exit criteria. That's an important. The other part that you need is confidence. That is the code that is generated. Do I believe in that code? Can I put that into production? Do you have that level of confidence? Or is it slop that is being generated? Then you are chasing down. I've heard the term AI babysitters. These people are like looking at the code that is generated by AI and now trying to fix it. There was a LinkedIn job title that I was seeing: Vibe Code Cleanup Specialist. These are job titles of people.
Of course it is.
So,
yeah.
Right? So I think in that sense, yes, vibe coding gets you started. It's great to get an MVP, to get a feel for it. It really lowers the bar for non-coders to get into the world. But is it ready for enterprise software? I don't think so.
Cool. I absolutely agree. Like it's good. I love the things that's happening. I love seeing the creativity that's happening. I think that's great. But yeah, you're right. I think getting to the next 41 kilometers of that marathon, it's not vibe coding. It is software engineering. You're absolutely right. But
exactly.
Maybe that boundary will push over time as things get better and so on. But it's still there. Like both things are needed right now.
And you're absolutely right. That boundary will continue to push. The coding agents are improving. So maybe it's not mile 1 marker, maybe it's mile 2 marker or mile 3 marker, and it just keeps going on better. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit because I also wanted to talk to you about the Intel layoffs that you were also personally impacted by. And I believe it was like what 25,000 people that was laid off at Intel. It was a massive layoff, as I remember.
Well, so
Um,
the numbers are unknown, but yeah, it
okay,
just
estimated to be 25,000. Okay, yeah,
yeah,
I saw an
yeah.
article, and I guess that was about it. It's probably somewhere in that ballpark. So, and as you said before, like you haven't really applied for a job in like a very long time. You just went from job to job by being asked to do so, and all of a sudden you found yourself being a job seeker. And I really wanted to talk to you about this because I was following you on LinkedIn, where I see your post, and you're like, well, I got laid off, and then 2 days passed or something, I think, and then you're just like, now I'm starting to build things. I was just like, oh, you just jumped straight into it. So I wanted to talk to you about this, but also like how it is to be like a job seeker now in this market where AI plays such a huge part. And I think also you have been working in VP levels for such a long time. And I think that it's not just juniors in the industry that's impacted by this need for AI, but also like on your level with decades of experience, AI plays a huge part. That's my understanding. But what was your, like, maybe just tell me about your experience instead of me trying to, to interpret it.
Yeah, no, I think when I got fired, well, laid off, right? People have gone back and
That's
forth. Is it fired? Is it layoff? Same thing, you no longer have a
it's the
job,
same.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same thing, right? So uh, it stings. It
Yeah.
hurts. It's like, what the heck? You fired me for what? And but as they say, there are 5 stages of grief, and the last one is really accept. There is denial, there is anger, there is depression, there is negotiation, all sorts of stages. So it definitely stings. It definitely hurts. It's like, oh my God, life is gonna be so uncertain now. It's like, and I don't even know how to look for a job because I've never looked for a job for the last 25 years. And the job market is different. I don't have a resume. I got to build a resume. All that, drama has to go on. But for me, I think the most important part were, I think I would say 2 pieces that really came to my life very quickly. First is I cut through the first 4 stages and come straight to accept stage. Okay, it has happened. I'm not going to go through denial. I'm not going to negotiate anything. What if this? What if that? None of that. I'm certainly not depression. I got rid of that completely. Just come to accept stage. This has happened. I'm out of here. So that was the first call that I made. I think that was very important. And then the second equally important part was to kind of put a perspective. Often we don't talk about self-compassion. And to me, that is super important. In plane, they say, right? If you're short of oxygen, put your own mask first before you put somebody else. That to me is self-compassion. So for me, it was like, oh, you know what? Intel fired me. That is not an indication of who I am or what I have done. And it's normal to have that imposter syndrome that have I done anything in the industry? And people have asked me like, Arun, do you even think about it? I said, no, no, I mean, I'm a human, right? So that thought crosses your
I
mind.
totally get it. Yeah.
That thought crosses your mind, but then
Yeah.
you have to immediately shoot it down. That's no. Hey, wait. You know what? I've done a few things in the industry that are very credible, that are very known. People recognize me for it. And I would say those were the 2 things that I had to kind of keep reminding myself. It's not an indication of what I've done. And there is no negotiation, no bargain, certainly no depression. And in that sense, living my life as I was living with or without a job was very critical. So, for example, I love running, I love lifting. I kept my a workout every day, 1 hour workout every day schedule. Getting up, same thing, 5:30 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, go for a 10K run or do a lifting session. I have a gym in my garage, do all those kind of things. Because those kind of things we don't realize when you are in a denial mode, when you are in a depression mode and you stop working out, it becomes a toilet vortex, it just keeps going down the drain. And you really have to cut the cord over there, pull yourself out of it. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. So frankly, it was exactly 2 months. July 31st was my last day, and October 1st is when I started at JetBrains. It was exactly 2 months, but I kept a very strict schedule through that entire 2 months, in the sense that I would still get up at 5:30, I would still go for a run, I would still drop my son to school, all that stuff. I would still eat like a good healthy breakfast, and I will still, prepare lunch during the daytime, cut a salad, whatever, right? Whatever I was doing when I had a job. And then from 8:30, I will be on my laptop. I will be on my laptop until 6 p.m., sometimes longer, because then I think, hey, as a VP, as a team of, tens of dozens of people, I didn't have time to build anything. I want to go back to my root. And my root is I'm a builder. I like to build things. So let me go pick up things and learn something new. And that's where, you said really AI played a key role. I said, that's where I really believe vibe coding really helped me, because it really brought down the bar so low that somebody like me could actually code. So I started building a bunch of things using Cursor and Lovable and Replit. I started trying out these tools, coding agents, and the other thing that I'm good at is DevRel. So I kind of started writing articles on my thought process. What do I believe in DevRel? Why it needs to be done, et cetera, et cetera. And that got a lot of attention. So I think in the desperate times, as I say, desperate times need desperate measures. I just go back to really what I believe in goodness as and see what I can do best. And to me, action absorbs anxiety. I think that's very important,
Yeah.
because I could be sitting here and be anxious about the future. What job am I going to get? What am I not going to do? What happened to my vacation next year? Can I really go? What if I don't get a job until the summer of next year? All those things, very human thoughts. They did cross my mind. And there were days where I was down, where I was beaten down, because I have applied to so many jobs or I've talked to so many people, but nobody's responding back. But then, 2-3 days have gone by and something uplifting happens again, and then it brings you back again. But that's life.
Yeah.
So I think getting used to that life, is what took time. But then I quickly got used to it.
And just staying in the rhythm and just having that self-discipline to do the thing. So, so as you touched on this point of being a job seeker and the disappointments and so on. Like, how is the experience now compared to like when, I know it's been some while since you actually applied for a job, but like, has the requirements changed? Do people look different at like applicants today? Is it like you need to know your AI? Is it just like the skill sets is different, the bar is higher, or is it just totally different? Like, what is it?
Yeah. I think it really depends at what level the work is being done, really. If you are a recent college grad, then they still evaluate you on your coding skills. And it's less about coding skills, it's more about, can you orchestrate code using these coding agents? Can you be an orchestrator of these coding agents? That's sort of the level that they're looking at. Because if you're just doing pure Python programming, pure Java programming, that's okay. There is still a need for that, and there'll always be a need for that. But how quickly can you elevate yourself and be a more effective user is what people are looking at it. At my level, this was all about networking. I barely got a response that I applied on the portal. I had to create a resume. I had to tweak it. I had to write custom cover letters. Um, the system that is broken is the ATS, what they call as the application tracking system.
Yeah.
Right? So you apply for a role and it just tags you, ranks you. So you never even get to a human being, as a matter of fact, in most of the cases. So for me, anything that worked out was purely through human connection. So I applied for a role, and I was very proud of the network that I've built over the years. So I just started reaching out to people. And funny enough, I created a private GitHub repo. And in that private GitHub repo, what I did is any company that I was talking to, I would open them as a ticket, as an issue tracker. And then anybody in that company that I'm talking to, I'll put down those details, because that was easy for me to manage. Oh, I'm talking to such and such company. Boom, let me put my details over there. What resume did I submit? What cover letter did I submit over there? Who did I talk to in that company? So that was an easy way for me to manage, just a private GitHub repository. Not the ideal way, but that just worked for me. Your mileage may vary. I've seen people doing, fancy AI tools, spreadsheets, whatever works for you, but that is what worked for me. And I was looking at it in that GitHub repo. When I accepted JetBrains' offer, I had 60 plus issues that I closed. And what that means is I applied to 60 plus companies, or I at least talk to people at 60 plus different companies, and because I'm at an executive level, I was really talking to CTOs and CIOs and CSOs and senior VPs all over the company. But really, just I was able to capture all of that conversation in my private GitHub repo, essentially. But yeah, I mean, for me, anything that worked was a personal nudge, and very grateful and very humbled that as I was going through this journey, a lot of the people were responding and reaching out to me. Hey, Arun, this role could be suitable for you. This role could be useful to you. But I was very clear, I mean, based upon the phase of your career, where do you want to go? So I had a lot of opportunities, frankly, at a lower level, but I was clear of the value that I provide. And I remember when Intel hired me, they said, yeah, we're looking for a director, senior director. I said, no, no, no. You want to make a cultural change. You really need a VP. And then I said, you want to buy a Maserati? You don't pay a Hyundai price. So that's what I used for the last couple of months as well, that I know the value that I bring. I know the cultural change that I can bring. I know the leadership that I can bring. I am not going to go down, and I'm not in a rush. I'm in a financially comfortable position, so I can hang in there and really seek what I want.
Yeah. Yeah, but it seems like even though you say you have in a comfortable position, you didn't allow yourself to become comfortable. Like, again, talking to 60 different companies before starting a new job after basically 60 days. So I guess you at least talked to 2-3 companies every day that first month, basically, to get this role.
I did. No, absolutely. And lots of discussions every day, lots of interviews. And then sometimes you recognize that you're not getting through, you're not able to convey your thought process in the interview. So the first couple of interviews are like, the first pancake is a throwaway pancake. The second pancake is when the griddle is nicely warm and it's a good pancake to have. So first couple of interviews are you're rusty because you don't know. It's like, oh, what are they asking? Yeah, I can answer it, but how do I answer it? So then over a period of time, I started getting refined in terms of building my thought process, really articulating it in the most precise, concise manner that is going to land well with the interviewers. I think right about the time when I was getting better at giving interviews, JetBrains says, come work for us. I said, okay.
That's the thing, like job interviews is a skill, and it's a weird thing because you only need it like hopefully every 3-4 years, and then you need it intensely and you totally forgot about it the last time you did it. You're really rusty every time you start doing it. It's it's like dating basically. You date and then you find a partner, and then you have to go back into dating, and you're terrible at it, whatever. Like
my example would be, well, I never dated, I got married to my wife and we've been happily married for over a quarter century now. I would call it as a muscle, right?
Yeah.
It's a muscle memory. If you are not using that muscle, you will lose that muscle. That's what it is, basically.
I think that's very true. And you touched on this thing with ATS and the system and the portals and the LinkedIn jobs being like very broken. And I think it seems like everyone is writing their resume with AI and AI is reading it and no one is getting hired because the system is just flawed. So, and you mentioned, go ahead.
And if you think about, in LinkedIn, there's an easy apply button.
Yeah.
Right? It gives you a job. It gives you a recommended job. If that easy button would work, nobody would be unemployed in this world.
Nope.
So it's more like a placebo effect, right?
Yeah.
So for me, again, I found the system fundamentally broken to the extent I started creating a agentic workflow that, hey, my first job is look at LinkedIn jobs and give me an alert of what jobs are available. The second part of the agentic workflow is now, once I've identified the job, craft my resume that matches that skill. The third part of the job is now look at through my network. Hey, here is a job, here is a company. Who do I know in that network? Who are my top referrers that I could reach out to? So I kind of started building an agentic workflow. We never completed it, but I kind of started building that project, frankly, on how could I craft something more meaningful out of it.
So, so again, what do you have advice for like other job seekers? Maybe people who are not at your level, but maybe further down. Like what is the best advice you can give them?
I think what I really, really believe in is you need to know what are you good at and be willing to stand up for it. That's the most important part. So that's one. And I really go with what Steve Jobs really said once: stay hungry, stay foolish.
Hmm.
And by stay hungry means always stay hungry for knowledge. There is no good or bad times to learn a new skill. At Intel for 3.5 years, I was a VP, very large team, managing that team. I could not learn a lot of technology. I was aware of the technology because my team was learning it. But as soon as I got an opportunity, I just jumped on it. I said, I'm going to just start building things right away. And I'm
Yeah.
not going to waste time because to me, as I said, action absorbs anxiety. I could be anxious about it as opposed to do some action on it because that way I'm not anxious. My mind is occupied with the action as opposed to being anxious about it. So I think in that sense, always be hungry, always be willing to learn new technology that is happening. There are still AI boomers and doomers. There's no point being a doomer about it. AI is here, very real, very credible. It's here to stay, only going to accelerate further. So don't fight against this. And I mean, as they say, resistance is futile. So don't resist it. Adapt it. Make it as a tool in your inbox, in your armory, and see how you can make the best use of it. So I think again, always be curious, always be contrarian, and don't worry too much about it. Think about what is in your impact and control. And in my 2 months, I was constantly going through that reaction. What if I don't get a job by Christmas? What if I don't get a job by
Hmm.
Thanksgiving? But I really had to pull the cord. That's no, it's okay. What if I don't get it? I don't get it. And I'll keep going on this journey, of learning, because who knows, this may time never come back. So I think living in the current moment, focusing on what you can do to impact and control is critical.
That's great advice. So, um, let me switch gears a little bit here again. So to talk a little bit about developer experience. So you have a background in this, and also in open source and the tooling and so on. You've been on a Java team and so on. So as we talked a little bit about before, like AI is playing a new role, and like people might not care about the little details anymore. But where do you see like developer experience heading? Because I think like you've had companies, you work for companies who cared greatly about developer experience. But do you think these companies who really built this like DevEx as a muscle, do you think they're gonna lose that advantage because everything is turning into a chat window and an MCP server? Like, do you think that move of the developer experience is really moving into these like core things right now? Do you think the experience is gonna matter less now?
No, I think it's only going to matter more, as a matter of fact. This is a discussion that you and I were having about sort of building the enterprise software, frankly.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how I see it, right? So from the developer perspective, yes, it's going to be the chat window, it's going to be the MCP server. I pull the data from there and go write up a Streamlit app for me. I don't care how you do it, you just figure it out, and I make it go in a loop, run an agentic workflow over there. End of the day, no, day one is great. Day one is great because it's getting your software up and running. What about day two? What about day three? What about day four? And that's where the maintainability, can your coding agent find a bug into that massive, millions of lines of code base, understand that organizational context. So I think in that sense, again, the bar is going to keep pushing out in the direction, but leverage AI with owning the full responsibility. If your customer says, here is a bug in the product, here is a bug in the UI, you can't say, I didn't do it, the AI did it. So who's responsible?
Yeah.
It's like self-driving car, right?
Yeah.
You're in a Waymo, you are in a Tesla. If an accident happens, who's responsible, right? So I think that's how it's going to be with the coding agent. Yeah, coding agent has generated the code. So for example, in the Linux Foundation, the policy is you can contribute code which is generated by AI, but you cannot say signed by coding agent.
No,
You got to
you
say
take
signed by
responsibility
you.
for it. Yeah.
You got to take responsibility of
Yeah.
it. So I think in that sense, you need humans very well. The jobs of the humans are going to evolve. They're going to be more orchestrator, architect kind of people. And I think I listened to this in one of the Wall Street Journal podcasts. They were talking about that how the corporate world is more like a pyramid. And they said it's going to become more like diamond. And by that, what they mean is in corporate, you have lots of entry level jobs. And then as you go up, the jobs getting fewer.
Yeah.
They were saying with this AI agents, the lower level jobs are probably going to get eliminated. Those are going to be taken up by the coding agent, but you would need a fatter pyramid in the middle, these orchestrators, these choreographers, these people who can control the coding agents. Those are going to be a lot more so that they can actually, run these things. So I think in that sense, the whole experience, see, developer experience is not just about building product. It's about developer advocacy. It's about product marketing, how your messaging looks like. It's about getting your docs right. It's about, as you're working with the customer, how are you enabling them to be successful in that part of it? It's about your API design, all of that. So I think in that sense, yes, the coding agents are going to continue to push the bar on it, but the developer experience is always going to be a key part of it, because the number of people who create the software versus number of people who consume the software is massively different. So developer experience is more for people who consume the software, not for who build the software. I mean, it's for both,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the primary consumer is the customer.
So I think I was maybe looking at developer experience from, like, you can say, a person point of view, and your diamond kind of reminded me of this, that maybe we're looking into a place where, okay, we have, senior developers who use AI for very specific things, like getting better testing or getting better diagnostics of their running servers and so on. And then you could say, junior developers who might use it more like vibe coding or assistance of understanding a new API or a new framework so they can get up and running faster and writing some stuff there. And then maybe you have this new persona who is like not really a developer, but like it's just vibe coding stuff together to kind of prove a point, or like have a prototype, or like do that first mile as you use in your running analogy. So developer experience might be more fragmented because you have these like more divided personas. They might see the developer experience totally different because of this.
Correct. No, absolutely right. See, because the way you want to think about this is, see, when you are a senior architect and you are giving a task, you have composed what the task is going to do, and you are giving it to a junior developer, then you don't say whatever code the junior developer is going to create, I'm going to just consume it as it is. You still mentor them, you still guide them. And that's how you really got to think about in terms of coding agents. You're asking the agent to produce the code, but you still got to kind of define the box around it. You still got to say, here is my spec. Are you following the test driven development? So that you build the right guardrails, you build the right mechanisms around that junior developer coding agent, whatever you want to call it. But then once you build those mechanisms, that's when you start seeing the benefits. So I think it's less about is vibe coding the right tool or not. It's about, no matter what the tool is, are you building the right mechanisms around it to safeguard your developer experience?
So you're now VP of developer experience at JetBrains. So can you tell me a little bit about what is, like, JetBrains is doing one of the most popular IDEs, and they do a lot of like really well made tooling for developers. They've been known for like an amazing developer experience over the years, like very well respected tools. So like, what's your role going to be there? Like building on top of that, and I guess you're also going to work with AI in that space.
That's right. That's right. So I think I've been a long time JetBrains users. I mean, I've written, I have blogged, I've created video tutorials. Gosh, 20 years ago when I was in the Java team, new JDK release comes out. Here is how you consume that in IntelliJ, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, now JetBrains has a large number of tools, whether it's Rust or Go or Python. They have an IDE for it. And that's sort of been the bread and butter for the last 25 years. Uh, More recently, earlier this year, they launched Junie, which is their own coding agent. And then now that's in the process of, that's a more generic agent, but now that's getting integrated into the IDE itself. So one of the studies that we saw was how you can give a coding agent a task independently, or you have a coding agent actually operating inside an IDE, which has access to the debugger and the profiler. That combination is very compelling, and that significantly improves the amount of reliability of the code that you can do. So I think that's the combination that we are looking at. How do we explore that? How do we bring that? And to us, it really comes down to giving developers a choice. In JetBrains, for example, you can integrate Juni, you can use Cloud Agent. We are working on other agents as well. So really, no vendor lock-in. You can choose the IDE, you can choose the coding agent, you work with it. It's also about improving your confidence in the amount of code that is generated, because JetBrains has this 25 years of legacy of building that deep developer intelligence. So how do you combine that developer intelligence with AI is the combination that we are constantly looking at it. So really it comes down to really giving you that control, giving you that choice, giving you that confidence, and how we're going to drive it. And really the control part of it is how can you time box your experiments, which we talked about it earlier. So my role is going to be here focused on everything that we do outbound to developer across different IDEs, whether it's product marketing, whether it's developer advocacy, whether it's reaching out to customers, whether it's getting our presence at the conferences, whether trying out tutorials, whether doing workshops, hackathons, all sorts of stuff. So it's a very, very exciting time for the company because we are a private and a profitable company. And I don't know any AI companies that are profitable today. So I think in that sense, and that's a big deal. I mean, it's a private and a profitable company and doing really well. And my idea is, by being on the West Coast, really help elevate the presence of JetBrains across the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I laugh because I think I saw one of these like LinkedIn posts was like every company is an AI company now. Someone said, just remind us about that.
Yeah. I mean, I was reading a statistics. They were saying that ChatGPT has 800 million weekly active users.
Yeah.
So it's pretty massive.
It is massive. It's like there's no denying that AI is here, as you say, and there's resistance is futile. You need to kind of figure out what is good for and what is good for you.
Right.
So if you can, like, being in this role and like looking ahead, like you usually say like 5 years from now, but like I think with this thing, I think it's going to be hard to judge. Maybe just a year from now. If you could kind of see, like, there is a bunch of shortcomings in how AI is used today, especially around developers and with the developer experience. So, like, what was like, if you can kind of pick and choose, just on like, what should we as an industry really figure out? Like, in a year, this is what we figured out that would make everything better for people. What would that be?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say the pace is concerning. I think the innovation needs to happen. This is early in the cycle, so a lot of that shakeout would happen essentially. But what I would love to see are more efforts towards responsible AI. That, how do we make sure this is a safe AI? This week, I believe, this week only, in California, they have passed a bunch of regulation so that you're not going to generate porn on LLMs. You can't do that. For children of certain age, because you cannot expose them to certain elements. So the guardrails need to be built around there accordingly. So the pace of innovation only has to grow. I'm certainly supportive of that. But how do we build? I'm a big believer in building those guardrails and mechanisms so that we can create very clear swim lanes. So then we can swim as fast as we can in that swim lane. So there needs to be more focus, more discussion around that topic on how that would look like. That's what I'm hoping. And we as an industry can put more effort towards it.
Yeah. So less like Wild West and more like maybe a little bit more boring.
Yeah. Because that's where we kind of start turning into a commodity, and more people will start believing into it. Because if you pick a person on the street, they will have all sorts of different opinions. And I don't know if safety is something that they really care about today, but that is something we cannot ignore.
I think that's a great way to finish this topic for today. And let's say that's a wrap for today. And I think thank you so much for joining me, Arun. I think for anyone listening or watching, if you want to follow Arun's work, you can check out his LinkedIn page where he posted all the updates in his job search. Did you publish all of this on your GitHub page? I don't know, but
I did. Well, the GitHub repo is private because there are lots of private names over there.
Yeah, so they can't get your list of network for your job search. Okay,
that would be weird. Yeah,
DM Arun for like a special like.
I've been thinking about it. Not now, but maybe in 5 or 10 years, I'm going to open source that GitHub repo because these names won't be relevant at that point of time, and then give a preview on that. So maybe let's make a commitment on this podcast 5 years from now, I can make the repo public.
I think that's a great promise. And with that promise, we're going to wrap up. And as always, this show has been brought to you by Docker, the open platform for building, shipping, and running apps. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you, Arun.
Thank you.